know that I love old movies. There's something about cinematography and a lot of movies. In 1944, there was a movie that became quite famous by the title of Going My Way. Bing Crosby starred as this priest who was responsible for changing a parish. The song from that movie that became famous is Would You Swing on a Star? It has a really interesting context to the song because, it talks about the fact that we all have these desires, but not necessarily the right motives. The song came about when the songwriter Jimmy Van Heusen was over at the Crosby house one evening, and the kids were giving Bing a really hard time about going to bed. And Bing's comeback was, so you don't want to go to school, would you rather be a mule? And Van Heusen thought that was such a quirky kind of comeback that he went home that night and wrote the song. You see, life's a whole lot like that. God has a plan and a purpose for every single one of us, but we don't always want to go with the flow. So would you like to be rich? Let's talk about wealth. Would you like to be rich? A few would say, nah, that doesn't matter to me. One guy might say, it's better to be poor and happy than rich and miserable. But couldn't something be worked out? Maybe like, can we be moderately wealthy and only a little bit moody? As Christians, this microphone is like really alive. Can you turn this down a little bit? I'm talking and I feel like I'm yelling. Thank you. There's a temptation that we fall into. You see, the Bible doesn't teach that money's bad. The Bible doesn't teach that wealth is wrong. It teaches that the wrong motives and the love of these things are the problem. 1 Peter says it this way. 1 Peter 6, 9 through 10. And Paul warns us, but those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith, pierced themselves with many griefs. Some of us can't handle the act. The best sermon that I ever heard on the motives of wealth. Well, anybody ever watch Rocky and Bullwinkle growing up? Fractured fairy tales? Well, I'm going to give you the story of the Russian fairy tale of the fish and the fisherman. It's a great story, and it really is scriptural. You see, there was a little old man and a little old lady who lived down by the sea, and they lived in a little mud hut, and they had a broken pot. And he was a fisherman. And he went out onto the beautiful blue sea one day and caught a fish, a golden fish, a beautiful fish, a large fish, and it talked. And he bowed to it and said, "Oh, great fish, a sovereign fish. I'm awestruck in your presence." And the fish said, "Well, what do you want? To let me go." And he said, "It's such a beautiful fish. I'd just rather put you back in the ocean." He put her back in the ocean and went home. And of course, his wife met him at the door. And he starts telling her the story about this beautiful golden fish. And she starts scolding him, giving him a hard time, cussing out, you could at least ask for my broken pot to be fixed. So he marched right back into his boat, went back out to the beautiful, calm blue sea, and found the fish. The fish is like, "So, what do you want?" "Well, my wife's unhappy with me. Could you fix her broken pot?" "So be it." He went back ashore, and there is his wife standing in the doorway with her mended pot. A couple days go by, and she's getting angry and perturbed. She goes, look at this place, this shamble of a place that we're living in. You could at least ask the fish for a new house. And she hammered on him and gave him a hard time, and he went back to his little boat and rowed back out to the sea that was tossing just a little bit, and calls out, oh fishy, and the fish comes up, and he goes, oh sovereign fish, oh great fish, my wife, who is scorning and giving me a hard time, has asked for a house, and I can't make her happy. Can you help me? Oh, so be it. Fish jumps back in the bay. He paddles back to the shore, and there's a beautiful house. Well, a week or two goes by, and the lady in the house is getting uncomfortable. She's getting more miserable as the days go on. Well, she says to him, I could be a movie star. I want to be a movie star. I want people to bow down and to worship me. I want fame and fortune and a palace and a mansion and all of that. And you horrible, creepy little man, how dare you not go out and ask this fish for this? Well, he gets in his little boat and he paddles out to the middle of the bright blue sea, and the sea is a little uncomfortable and it's bouncing around a little bit. He calls out, oh fishy, please come. The fish comes up. Well, what do you want now? Well, I'm living with this scornful, miserable woman who really wants to be a movie star and live in a mansion. Ah, I see. So be it, you have what you want. Well, he paddles back to the shore. There's the palace, the mansion. She's a movie star. There's those trucks with the funky lights flashing across the sky. There's maid servants and there's an entourage around her, and he can't get near her. It's not bad ending this. Anyway, a couple of weeks go by, and well, there's something wrong. She's more miserable than ever. And she's giving him a hard time, cussing at him, giving him all types of garbage, and says to him, I want to be the empress of the sea. I want to be in command of all the fishes of the sea. I want this fish to be my bidding, to do what I want it to do. Go and talk to the fish. Well, he didn't say a word, but he went to his boat. And as he's going out to the boat, the skies are dark, the sea is just tossing, and it's storm conditions, and everything looks miserable. He calls out, oh fishy, please come. And the fish comes up and says, what do you want now? I live with a really miserable woman. And she cusses at me and she gives me a hard time, and I'm beyond myself knowing what to do. Well, what does she want now? She wants to be the empress of the sea. She wants you to do all of her bidding and be a slave to her. Fish took one look at him, said not a word, jumped back into the ocean. He waited a little bit more. Ocean's just tossing and stormy, and well, he gives up and paddles back to the shore. And there on the shoreline is a little mud hut with the broken pot sitting out front of the shack. Wealth has an interesting way of getting to us. It's like eating peanuts. Can't stop. If you start out with the wrong motive in life, you're going to end up in trouble. Well, the Bible gives us some outlines. And let's look at them. This text, James takes on the presence of an Old Testament prophet, thundering against ungodly rich who oppose the poor. Now think about this. He's not talking about people in the church. He's talking about the world system of how those with wealth hate the poor. They truly do. The words of the text are not to appeal to repentance, but rather a scathing denunciation of what's to come, the wrath. While there may have been professing Christians in these churches to which James wrote, who were guilty of the sins he confronts here, his main target was the ungodly rich on the outside of the church. This is evident in both his prediction of judgment to come and also by the shift in chapter 5, verse 7, which he addresses those who are in the church, which we'll talk about next week. So why would James spend so much time denouncing those who are on the outside? Well, it's similar to how the Old Testament prophets pronounced woes of Israel's pagan enemies. For example, in Isaiah chapter 13. The warnings serve for two purposes. One, that it should encourage those of us who know God to be faithful and to endure, knowing that in due season, God will judge the wicked. That's the first thing he wants us to understand. The second, it's a warning not to fall prey to all the sins that are out there. It's like, imagine driving along a mountain road with no guardrail. What James is doing is building guardrails. He's showing us the parameters of how we should live. You see, wealth can be a dangerous trap, and we should be careful how not to use it and how to use it. So he makes 3 points. Point number 1. Wealth can be a dangerous trap that leads people into eternal destruction. It can. The Bible does not teach that money is evil, but that it's extremely dangerous when it falls prey into the hands of those who are prone to sin. Jesus called it the unrighteous mammon in Luke chapter 16, verses 9 and 11, because those who get their hands often use it sinfully. Money's like a loaded gun. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. True?
Yes.
That little thing with a little, the bullets are off in the shelf, and, I have a brother who's into handguns. He buys a 6-hour dealer, and he has these huge 400-pound safes that you can't get into. And he has triggers in one, and he has it perfectly safe. Those guns can't hurt anybody. Money can either do extreme good, or it can do extreme evil if left to its users. You see, when money falls into the wrong hands, it falls in with the following: the greedy, the selfish human heart. Money can quickly corrupt. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 19, after the rich young ruler walked away from salvation, "Truly I say to you, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, and say to you again, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle." Quick story, the eye of the needle. Do you know it's literally a gate in Jerusalem in the wall? That a loaded camel has to literally be offloaded and kneel down and crawl through this gate to get in. That's what Jesus was talking about there. It's going to be quite difficult with a wrong person with a wrong motive who has wealth. Which brings us to this. James gives 3 ways wealth can be a trap. 1, to be rich without God is to be short-sighted in light of eternity. To be rich without God is to be short-sighted in light of eternity. James' readers were mostly poor and oppressed who might have been thinking, why be righteous if all you get is oppression? Think about that. 90% of everybody who was alive at this time when the Bible was written were slaves. Everybody was in servitude. Everybody was being oppressed in some manner. Why be righteous if all I'm going to get is suffering? James' answer is because judgment's ahead. He begins in the beginning of this chapter, verse 1, "Come now, you rich, and weep. Howl for your miseries which are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted your garments and become moth-eaten. Your gold and your silver have rusted, and rust will be a great witness against you and consume your flesh like fire. It's the last days, and you have stored up treasure." There are 3 indicators of wealth during the biblical times. Three indicators. One, food. What did you have stored up? Two, clothing. Clothing was a sign of wealth because the average human being had one change of clothes. And what you were wearing. That was it. If you had a wardrobe, you're rich. And lastly, gold, silver. So if you had food stored up, and you had a wardrobe, and you had some cash, you're wealthy. And talk about lands. It's uber wealthy. Think about this. First, there was grain. You could store it up in large bins and silos. But James says your riches have rotted. Second, there was clothing. In a world where most of the poor had only clothes on their backs, it was a sign of wealth to have more than one change of clothes. You see this in Genesis 45, Joshua 7, Judges 14, 2 Kings 5, just to give you some places that you can check out in your further study. The Apostle Paul would claim that they had coveted no one's money or clothes in Acts chapter 20. James echoes Jesus, who warned that clothes are subject to the ruin of moths in Matthew 6. The third thing was gold and silver. James knew, of course, that these metals are not subject to literal rust, but he was using the irony to make a point. When God brings judgment, even these precious metals will be doomed to corruption. What good was all the gold and silver in the world in 70 AD when Titus destroyed Jerusalem and slaughtered 1 million Jews? You see, in James 5:3, in the last days you have stored up your treasure. He's referring to the entire period between Christ's ascension and the second coming, which is viewed as the last days. But death is the last day for all of us. And the rich fool in Jesus' parable found out that he had plenty stored up in his life, but when he died, he was poor where it mattered the most. And that's the point that he's making. Are you wealthy in the right areas? Second thing, to be rich without God gives temporary comfort and ease, but long-term misery. The ungodly rich mistakenly think that they are relieving themselves and their family from hardships through wealth and possessions. But James says that they are storing up misery and hardship for final judgment. The very thing that they trust in for comfort now will result in their final ruin. The Bible commands us to provide the necessities of life for our families and ourselves. There is nothing wrong with living comfortably. Hear me on this. There's a quote that I printed out. I'll give you the quote in a couple minutes. But the fact is, there's a problem here. There's nothing wrong with having money. There's a problem that you're trusting in it. There's a problem if it means more to you. There was a guy a number of years ago who had been homeless. And he was a young man at the time. And he gave his heart to Christ. And he was struggling with his lifestyle. He was struggling with the issues in his life. And he had this burning passion in his heart that he wanted more in life than what he was currently dealing with. And he was at the Palisades at a mission in California. And God spoke to him in that service that night, the mission service. And God said, give me whatever you have, sow it in the offering, and I will turn your life around. God doesn't do that very often. And he did. Turned his life around. He overcame alcohol. He went back to school, got his degree in engineering, and went on to become an inventor at a major company. Oh, some 40 years later, he went back to visit the mission where it all began as a young teenage boy, he was living on the streets. And he's sitting there, and he's singing hymns, and he's listening to the visiting preacher and the whole thing. And God stirs his heart, says, you want to write a check and do it all over again? End of the story. is the young man said, I couldn't do it. The check was too big. Think about what he missed out on. You see, our substance can make us so comfortable that we can't trust God. One of the things that gets a lot of young people in trouble is their credit rating. They get good credit. My daughter has gotten probably 19 credit card offers since she, and it comes to the house. So here, you like a car? No. Yeah.
No lie, for the past 12 weeks, every single week I get another mailing for Discover.
Yeah, exactly. Well, here's the thing. Use those cards and be unwise. You will end up, and I know students who have $70,000 of student loans and $27,000 of credit cards that they lived off in college. Do you know what it's like to pay off $100,000? It ain't so easy. It's a lot of work. It's a mortgage. It's years. And here's the thing. You had this comfort zone presented to you that you took advantage of. And it has now entrapped you and enslaved you where you no longer have freedom to move. Well, that's what James is talking about here. James is talking about, wealth can provide this short-term comfort, but it won't provide the big picture eternal plan. It can, but it doesn't always if you operate wrongly with it. Again, money is not the root of all evil. Wrong motive and evil desires and bad living is what is evil about money. Third thing. To be rich without God provides short-term advantages, but long-term loss. With wealth comes power. And as someone said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Through the history of corrupt dictators have amassed wealth and power. Now, some of you might not be old enough to remember when the Philippines fell. When what's her name? Melda Marcos. The story goes, and I have heard and seen a lot of excess in my day. About the time that the story was breaking, I had an experience. My wife and I were shopping for a dining room, not a dining room table, but a kitchen table. And we found in the newspaper when we were living in Wilmington, some young gal who was selling off a kitchen table. And she was going overseas and she was selling off her belongings and what she didn't want to move. And so it was a house sale. And we went and we saw the little table. Of course, we didn't buy it, but the experience of my wife coming to me and saying, "You have to go to the bedroom now." I'm going, "Why do I need to go to this gal's bedroom?" I said, is the bedroom set worth seeing? She goes, "No, but her closet is." Well, her closet wasn't what shocked me. It was you walk in and there's the floor-to-ceiling closet. What shocked me is when my wife goes like this, and I look to the right, and literally floor to here, from here to that table, are stacks of boxes of shoes.
Oh my goodness.
Shoes. Melba Marcos, when they took the palace back, literally had rooms of shoes. She had wheelbarrows of bras and girdles. She had closets of jewelry. And she said that her fans, her people, expected a princess to encourage them. Mind you, her people were starving. But she would dress to the nines at all times, and apparently never wore the same pair of shoes twice. James doesn't elaborate here. denounces the ungodly rich that provides an obvious application that we need to see. Okay? And here it is. We should be careful not to use wealth in an ungodly manner. Since misuse of wealth will bring a person into horrible judgment, it makes him weep and howl in misery. Verse 1. It should make us sure that we do not profess to know God, but we profess our ungodly use of wealth. A number of years ago, I did a lot of research on wealth. You know, I was unpacking what I was hearing with the TV preachers about name it and claim it, and I really wanted to study it. I really wanted to understand, because it was getting to the point of being overwhelming what you were hearing people and how they were living. One of the things that really amazed me were men of great wealth who came to their senses along the way. You know, the book Solomon, when King Solomon, he prayed for wisdom and God gave him great wealth. Well, he used the wealth wrongly. And he wrote books in Scripture about all his misery that came about because he misused the wealth that God gave him. Well, I want to read you something that Andrew Carnegie wrote about wealth. In his essay, Wealth, which was published in the North American Review in 1889, industrialist Andrew Carnegie argued that the individual capitalists were duty-bound to play a broader cultural and social role and thus improve the world. Do you know that out of his pocket, almost every town in America got a public free library? And to that point in time, if you had a library in your town, you had to pay significant dollars to use it. That's why if you go in western Pennsylvania or northern Pennsylvania, you'll see Carnegie libraries. What he literally did, he wrote checks to these towns and said, I want a library that anybody can use for free. He goes on to say this, and this is incredibly profound. Quote from the same Gospel of Wealth that was published. This then is held to be the duty of a man of wealth. First, to set an example of modest, ostentatious living, stunning display to provide moderately for the legitimate wants of those who depend upon him. And after doing so, to consider all surplus revenues which come to him simply as trust funds, which he is strictly bound as a matter of duty to administer in a manner which of his judgment is best calculated to produce the most beneficial results to the community. When he died, he left money to his family, but not to the level that he lived. The $1 billion that he got in 1899 from Mellon for U.S. Steel, he literally put to literally give 100% of it away. That's why we have the National Gallery in Washington. That's why there are public libraries all across America. The man literally said, let me do good what's been given to me as a steward. You see, here's some pitfalls. We hoarded. We hoarded the whole Melville Marco stuff. We get the wrong motives, we get protective of our wealth. We start cheating people. We start cheating people. It's like we don't have enough, we want more. We have to guard ourselves not to be self-indulgent. You know? We shouldn't sit back and okay, I'm a father of daughters. I want to bless my kids. I grieve sometimes on what I'm not able to do for my kids. But I live in Wallingford. Do you know how people live around here? Of how one of the greatest issues that I have with Christians and their kids is, what do you mean your kid is in 6 clubs and organizations? Why are you running to soccer and swimming and this and that and this club and this lesson and this organization and that? We made a decision that we would allow our kids. I was raised in a household where my parents lived vicariously through my brother and I. You know, we were musicians. They just lived through us. You know, we were child prodigies. We did all this stuff, and I swore that I would never be that way with my kids. That I was going to give them the opportunity, as I had means, to explore and to taste and try. Yes, they did horsey camp. Yes, they did art camp. They played soccer for a little bit. They had music lessons. We wanted them to try a little bit of everything for them to discover what God would be able to do within them. However, I have friends and some people in this church so overwhelm their kids. Your kids aren't in church. Your kids aren't worshiping God because they're too busy. They're doing soccer. They're doing drama. They're doing music lessons. They're doing swim team. You're literally running. You have 5 kids and you're literally, I'm not going to name names, but you'll figure it out. I'm totally frustrated with people who come to me and say, my kids don't love Jesus. I'm saying, your kids don't love Jesus because they don't have time to love Jesus because they're doing 5 activities every day after school. That's wrong. That's this whole self-indulgent mentality of luxury that we have in America. Let your kids pick one thing and let them enjoy it thoroughly. You know? It's just good, common sense. Our responsibility is to be faithful in the realm of God's financial stewardship. You know, life's not final. Each and every one of us need to have a legacy. Each and every one of us need to make plans. Each and every one of us need to look at our lives and say, I want to do what is right. Jesus in Luke 16 tells of the unusual parable of the unrighteous servant. He's about to be fired because of his mismanagement, but he shrewdly calls his master's debtors and reduces the amount that they owe. Jesus' point was not that we should be corrupt in order to get ahead, but rather his point was that we should imitate this godless man who thought in advance about his future and used what he had to make provision for himself. We should use the unrighteous mammon that we now have to make friends, so that when it fails, they will perceive us into eternal dwellings. Luke 16:9. In other words, while you can use your money that will be eventually taken away, use it to bring people to Christ where they can never be taken away. In the short term, what do you invest in? What do you invest in? This is not designed to be a hard message to talk about because we need to move. I always laugh at what God does. I mean, I respectfully laugh at what God does because God does have a wicked cool sense of humor. This was given to me. We divided up how we were going to preach the book of James. At that point in time, we had not discussed the roof. Okay? I was scheduled to speak on this subject 3 months ago. It's a God thing. So here's the challenge. Are you using what God's giving you to His glory? Are you making an advance? Are you living in such a way that your means isn't inhibiting what you can do in your life? Are you being a good steward in all areas? Are you providing for your family? Are you careful not to get into too much debt that will choke you off? Are you looking for ways of blessing people? You know, are you supporting a mission? We're going to have a missions conference in a couple months. Is there a missionary or a mission project that you're giving towards? The man I used to work for, who I love dearly, is a dear friend. He and his wife supported the mission in Macau, the orphanage. And he did everything he could to make sure there's pictures on his refrigerator. It wasn't like Compassion International where they send you the pictures of the kids that you're supporting. He literally had gone there a couple times, took pictures of kids that were there. And he and his wife had them by name on the refrigerator. And every dinner time, they would take, one of the kids' job was, before they said their prayers, would go up and take one of the pictures off the refrigerator and come down, and as a family, they would pray for that kid that night. He was sowing into God's kingdom. You know? Whatever the cause, find one that you can support out there or through here to do. Make sure God's house is taken care of. You know? I said this in my prayer earlier today. Do you realize that this entire building was paid for before we started? God gave us a building and the money to renovate it. The current big projects, the heater and the roof, are lifetime projects that, you know, once this roof is done, guys like Vic and I, we'll be dead in heaven next time it needs to be done 35 years from now. You know, maybe, I don't know, you might live to 120, I don't know. I know I won't. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, there's some projects that we need to tend to that are once in a lifetime projects that once they're done, they're done. But the fact is, God has given us a beautiful, wonderful resource that we can use to bless the community, that we can use to reach our friends. Let's take care of it, you know? What are you doing in your kids' lives? Are you investing in your kids if you have kids? If you don't have kids, you need to be thinking about, hey, what camps are out there that I can maybe get involved with that I want to make sure are there when my kids are old enough to go participate. Whatever. You need to be good stewards, and that's the challenge of this message today. We can talk long about this. We can go into deeper things, and we will if you want. Come see me, come see Eric. We'll talk. But I want to challenge you today. Really think about, some of you are starting out, some of you are finishing up. We're all in different parts of the journey. Just be wise. Just be wise. And act accordingly as God puts in your heart. We should pass this. If you want to give to the roof project, please give to the building fund.
Either say building or say roof.
So
You
we
don't
know
have
that
to
it's,
write a separate check, just indicate,
yes,
I'm giving $50 and I want to
whatever,
give it to the
yes.
roof.
Folks, people matter. Everything we do is because people matters. Jan Renshaw's father passed away last night, cancer. And I'm going to pray for them this morning as we close. Jan and her husband were the other family with a small baby. We want to pray for them this morning. I want to encourage our ladies, if you could organize some meals to maybe take over to them to help them through. My wife is a little worked up right now. Her back was really bothering her this morning. You know what I'm talking about. She couldn't get up this morning because of her back. But if some of you ladies can get together and organize taking some meals over to their house over here in Wallingford, it would be a real blessing for them. But you know, it matters. People matter. Scouts are about to start. I need some people to step up and be involved with our scouting program. And I want to explain this. We had the privilege of chartering a Cub Scout pack. They were orphaned. Nobody wanted them. Firehouse didn't want them. The school district said, we don't want you because of your conservative stance. We had the privilege of adopting. We inherited 30 families. 30 families and kids. Okay? We have the right to run that program. It's not just we have adopted it and we're letting them eat here. We can help run the program. And come February, there's going to be a changing of the guard. Some of the kids are aging out into Boy Scouts, which means they'll go somewhere else. And there's some dads that need some help. So if you're a guy or a moms make great Cub Scout leaders, by the way, and you'd like to be involved with that program, Matt over here is one of the dads in the program. John's one of the dads in the program. talk to those guys. They'll connect you, or I can connect you. It's an opportunity for us to invest in our community. It's an important opportunity. Other announcements. Yes, baptism. Next Sunday afternoon at 1:30 at Brandywine Summit Camp Meeting in the community pool. We will be doing a baptism service. If you know of somebody who you have led to Christ who needs to be baptized, see me. Here's your opportunity. We're going to get wet. Then we're going to eat cheeseburgers out by the pool. Yes. Anybody else? Announcements? Okay. Tonight, 6 o'clock here at the Forge. Encourage you to be here. Why don't you stand? And we'll close with a prayer. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been away for a couple weeks. I forgot order and procedure. And you guys are better. Much better. So. Anyway, Father, we just pray this morning for our friends. We pray that, number one, we would be faithful. We pray as a congregation we would be faithful to the Word, faithful to you with the stuff that you bless us with. Father, we also pray for the Renshaws. Put a hug around them this morning, that they would feel your presence and know that they're loved. Lord, bless and guide and be with them, Lord, and meet their needs. I pray for Mom and for the extended family, because I know they're going to be burdened right now. Be with them in your son's name. Father, part us now with your blessings. We will come together. In Jesus' name. Amen. Say hi to somebody this morning.